Pierce, you want to talk about Cold War Commander 1?
No, I hate that game.
It's trash. So we're going to be doing the LittleWarsTV grading system, except we're not going to be getting any points. We're basically going to just be deciding if we like a category or if like this rulebook succeeds in a category, if it doesn't, or if we're just lukewarm about it, basically.
Kind of a 3-point scale, 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, we're not going to be super...
Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle.
Exactly, yeah. First category that we're going to go off on is book presentation. Would you like to lead?
Yeah, I think that the book has, in some places, a lot to be desired, but in other places, it really excels. I think that the quick reference in the back, you can almost play the entire game from the quick reference, in a lot of cases, which is great. But it includes a quick reference, which is also great, and you can't say that about every rule system.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately so.
Yeah. I think that presentation-wise, it works out. It's obviously a black and white book, but that's fun. It has lots of different diagrams. I find that sometimes the examples it gives are sometimes a little bit too long.
Yes.
It's like you have some things that have like a 3-page example for the command phase, and I feel like it would be more helpful to maybe have like a more concise kind of structure there.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, this isn't the worst rulebook I've ever seen. There are way worse ones that are way more expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'd give this about a middle score.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say it's probably like middle, maybe even on the upper end, considering it's from 2006.
Yeah. That's fair.
There is a couple times where like when we first started learning how to play this, where we had to go back and look for stuff, but it's laid out fine enough, I'd say. Yeah.
And there's always the case where there'll be 1 or 2 special rules that kind of slip in that we would really like if they were on a QRF, but they're not, and so half the time you play, you forget them.
Yes. And I think we do need to shout out like just how good the QRF is in this.
Yes, that's fair.
Which I'll like splice some screenshots in here now, but it's awesome. Like you really can play the entire game through the QRF. It's
got the blunders on there. It has all the shooting modifiers and the shooting chart. You really can't beat that. With some exceptions, you can almost play the whole game from it, which is I think what you want from a QRF.
Yes, 100%. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty good. Could be better, but from 2006. So
yeah.
Next section, playability. This is basically just measuring like how easily you can pick up this game. I guess also like how easily you could put a game of it together.
Yeah. Teaching it, I think, probably.
Yeah, I'd say it's like extremely playable, actually.
So we got into this ourselves because we were looking for a simple to play Cold War Commander, and we experimented with a couple other systems. Fistful of Toes is an example of something that we messed with. We finally settled on this system. And we learned it in 1 or 2 sessions of actually playing it. Yeah. And we've introduced like 3 or 4 other people to it at this point in time, and they've always really liked it. They've always liked how it works out.
Totally.
So I'd say it's extremely playable. It's fun. It's engaging. There's fun decisions to make. Mm-hmm. And the game is easy to learn, but you never really get to master it.
Right.
Like, there's always more to do. There's always more depth. It's always more interesting.
Yeah. And also, we play it in 6mm and 15mm. Yeah. And especially in 6mm, like we're talking really small stand counts, even at like pretty big games. Like we just finished a game, which I had 1,000 points, or like someone will have 2,000 points, someone will have 1,000, and you're talking like 20 stands
at most
for a big army.
Yeah, at most. Now, of course, there's always flux in that. I mean, if you take a bunch of cheap stuff,
cheap infantry and crap like that,
a bunch of cheap Comlock bullshit.
But like other than that, like stand count is really low. Like it is nice to have a lot of terrain for these because this is super scenario focused, which we also like a lot.
That kind of that's going to definitely lean us. One important thing with Cold War Commander is that it's going to be very difficult and very rare that you're going to have a fair fight.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be set up to lose from the start.
Yes.
And that's just part of the game. And you have to look at, okay, I'm not going to win decisively on the field here. So what are we going to do instead? Like, I'm going to fight a blocking action, a delaying action, and that's where the scenarios really come in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the battle, and the results, I mean, this kind of flows a little bit into mechanics, so we're getting a little bit ahead and knows our historical flavor. Mm-hmm. But I think it's great. I think it's very playable.
Yeah, totally agreed. I give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up, for sure.
Next section, we've got mechanics. and I guess we can talk about this one for quite a bit.
Yeah.
So the first big thing for people who aren't aware, the Commander series is based off War Master, which was like an old Games Workshop game written by Rick Priestley. So the basic idea is that you're using your commanders to actually activate like all your units of battle groups, and it's 2d6 based for. Well, the game is d6 based, but for like activating units, you're basically rolling against the morale and like activating stuff, and that's literally that is how you play the game. Like you are activating people, and that is
do a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of great. That's kind of what makes it. When people first get introduced to this system, I find that they usually get confused because they're used to much more like I activate a single unit, it does a thing, and then I'm done with that unit. Maybe barring reactions, but this has a much more involved system where people have to kind of get their head around that like you issue an order to a whole formation. Part of the formation can be moving, part of it can be shooting, part of it can be disembarking transports, and you can do that with one dice roll, and everyone involved in that net will do whatever needs to happen. And then you can activate those units again and again and again, so you can really kind of push your luck as you continue to activate units. As you do, you start to run into the blunder chances. If you're ever with boxcars, you get blunders, which can be command blunders, shooting blunders, friendly fire incidents, people going the wrong direction, dropping an airstrike on yourself. A lot of stuff can happen very quickly that adds a lot of friction.
Right.
Friction, I hear people say a lot, and that sounds like a very smart word. Someone use that word too. It adds a lot of friction to the game, which is desirable.
It's just it's like the right amount of friction too. Yeah. It's like usually you can do what you want until you can't, and that's like when you're like, oh.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm done, and that sucks.
Yeah.
Because now I'm about to get shot at.
But then even then, the game still has an opportunity fire in the reaction system.
Right.
So you're not, even when your turn's done after you've done all this stuff, you're still not actually done. You can still do things on your opponent's turn that affect things.
And let me preface, like, it is a you go, I go system, but as he said, there's like opportunity fire, which is like, it's kind of limited in scope, but also it's super useful. Yeah. Because there's also a suppression mechanic on top of that, which is like very simple and like really clever in my opinion. It's not like, it's just not too insane.
There's not layers. Yeah,
there's not layers. It's just like, are you suppressed? Yes. Okay, it's like, well, you're not doing anything this turn.
Yeah, there's no like suppression A, suppression B, pinned A, pinned B. There's not a million different modifiers.
Yeah. Another thing I'll say that I love, also coming from the War Master system, is that when you're shooting at each other and like your guys are accumulating wounds, all the wounds at the end of the turn are wiped. So the game always ends up being like very low casualty count.
Like we just played a game where I think I lost less than a quarter of my units, but I was still defeated. Yeah,
they're either like very little guys are dying, more guys are running away from like being suppressed and like morale breaks and shit like that. But yeah, like very low casualty count, which is also like a cool thing to see. Usually like these are just totally bloody, like half your army's dead.
We played some other systems that were also Cold War, where it was like, oh yeah, in this one battle, like 50 T-55s were destroyed, and like 3 companies of infantry, and they all fought over this highway. And I was like, well, it was like, okay, that's a little extreme. I think
it's like pretty much the entire. We would play a game, and like every tank that Russia has lost in Ukraine already would be lost.
In a battle for a highway. Yeah, exactly. Which is a little excessive. It's like, all right. I mean, there's losing, and there's like, okay, well, I don't know about that. Yeah. So this feels, and this kind of again will kind of bleed over into the historical flavor, the positioning. The low model count, the way that the initiatives work, it definitely feels. It feels right, and the mechanics, the mechanics flow nicely into a flavor of the game that works nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, we're gonna give initial impressions on the second edition,
right?
But we'll get to that later. But the big thing is that, like, when we were playing Cold War Commander, like, we played this game like, I want to say like over a dozen times.
Easily over a dozen times.
Just in like the past year.
Yeah.
Every time we play it, we're like, I don't know what else I would want to add to this game, because it does like everything that we want it to do.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. It's one of those things where it's like, there's always like, oh, well, maybe this could be explained differently, or maybe this could be worded differently, but it's never like, I wish the game didn't do this.
Right.
There's always, whenever something, and then even when you get screwed by blunders. I mean, we had a friend who his first roll of this game was a blunder, and he lost half his transports from a friendly fire incident before he even played this game before. And he still ended up walking away from that game, and he said he really enjoyed it, and he's played many games since. And that's one of the things, is like, yeah, you get screwed by blunders, but it happens.
Yeah.
And it adds this interesting element where, like, oh, I had this whole plan, I thought how things were going to go, and it went to crap immediately.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
God, I feel like we could talk about the mechanics of this game, because I feel like we love everything so much. Another thing that you pointed out when you were playing is that even when you need to look up a rule in this, let's say, like, you don't know how artillery works, right? You look it up, and it's like a paragraph. It's like not like a page. It's like, here's how it works, 3 points, you're done.
Yeah, and to be clear, there is a whole artillery section, but when you're looking for how a particular part of it works, it's usually pretty concise. Sometimes, again, wording might be a little bit of a problem, but but usually when you actually find what you're looking for, it's pretty concise. It tells you how it works, and then it moves on, which is great.
For sure. Also, like, army building, and there's one thing that we especially like in this book. Like we mentioned, it's scenario based.
Yeah.
So the scenarios, like, are really going to break up, like, it's like you said, it's almost never evenly matched.
No.
And on top of that, there's a force modifier roll where it, like, further decreases or adds to your army point like value. So let's say, like, we're doing an attack defense. He has 2,000 points. I have 1,000. Then we also roll on a modifier table where you can get plus or minus up to 25%.
Yeah.
And, like, that is super interesting and fun too, because, like, he could have double but then roll and get minus 25%, and I could get plus 25, and now there's,
so
like,
it brings
this,
it closer.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it pushes it even farther apart.
Yeah.
Which is still interesting.
It is, because... And it's fun being on the defensive side of that, because you're like, I'm completely overrun, and I know I'm going to lose, but, like, I'm going to fight to the last man.
Yeah, I'm going to try and fight and get something out of it. Yeah.
And also, the way the scenarios are laid out is, like, most of the time you can still get a minor victory, or you can deny them a major victory, and that still feels good. Like, even if you're like, oh, I'm not winning, but, like, I'm good with it. Like, I didn't lose anyone, and I got a minor, or, like, I got a minor loss or something.
Yeah, so, we lost this battle, but we withdrew in good, good shape, and that's fine. Like, you go on to the next one. I feel like that would lend itself well to like campaign play, which is not something that we've messed with, but it would, I think, be interesting in the future, some sort of campaign system. Yeah,
that is the one thing I think that would actually be good in this book. Like, now that I think about it.
Like a structured, because we played some games that have very great campaign systems that are, like, very fleshed out, and that would be nice if there was something similar to that. Maybe there's something online. We've played games where trying to do something like, I want to get out of a transport, can be difficult, which is always frustrating. Or it's like, oh, I want to, like, God help you want to try and, like, assault a house or something like that.
Right.
And there's so many different hoops you have to jump through and things you have to do. But this manages to get it concise, the results are believable. You can even do an airborne helicopter assault.
Yes. And it's simple.
It's not a million pages.
Right.
It's like a couple steps to get it done.
Yeah. It's nice.
I mean, we've done it. And it works, and it wasn't terrible. So that's, I mean...
Yeah. So, I'm guessing you're going to give mechanics a big
that's a big thumbs up.
Yes, that's easily the biggest thumbs up for me in my category.
That's absolutely effortless decision. I'm pleased to give this game a thumbs up.
To our next category, which is
historical flavor.
I don't really know much about this period. I mean, it is Cold War, but, like, they have stuff from, like, World War II onwards.
Yeah, obviously they have Blitzkrieg Commander, which has more of a focus. So they change. It's the same core system, but it changes some concepts to fit more to World War II. This is immediately post World War II, and then into the future. Obviously they have Future War Commander, which is going to be on the other side of that, but this covers you can play any kind of modern conflict with this easily.
Yeah.
And then the rules even go back to as far as the early 50s for the Korean War. And I think even maybe before that, I think they have some stuff from, like, immediately post World War II in here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it covers it really well. Again, I said it multiple times, the results are believable. You play a game and then you step away from it when you're done, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah, like, this was a desperate defense, this was an overwhelming assault. And it has rules inside of it that really play to the strengths of a lot of different systems. For example, they have the doctrines, flexible doctrines, rigid doctrines, normal doctrines, guerrilla doctrines, that change how your whole army plays. And that's really important to the historical flavor, because you get almost into an asymmetric area.
Yeah.
Where pact forces are, pact and pact equivalent forces have a rigid doctrine. They get bonuses to when they're having all the units do certain things at certain times. They're heavily encouraged to use scheduled artillery and scheduled airstrikes. They're not using, they're not using 4 artillery observers to call in targets on the fly. No, you pay your points and you schedule it out at the beginning of the game. Like we're dropping smoke on this intersection on turn 3. We're dropping HE for the next 6 turns on this position. Whatever the case is, you schedule it out and that you play to that strength. And that makes it historical.
And just going back one sec to mechanics, that's another thing that again we love is like you decide your mission, then build your list, so you can like create a battle plan. Yeah. And like I think the battle planning does feel very Cold War to me also, where it's like you said, like okay, we're doing scheduled artillery, like we're gonna smoke this road to cover our advance. Yep. Like there's counter battery, like counter battery stuff.
There's counter battery, which is awesome because first off, this game has your artillery off map. Makes sense. You're shooting like 50 kilometers away from each other. There's no reason for them to be on the table. That makes no sense. If they're on the table, something's gone horribly wrong. But but they still interact with each other. You don't just buy your artillery and it exists in a void that just attacks your opponent. If your opponent also has artillery, you can have whole artillery duels happening over the course of the battle. Yeah. Similarly with airstrikes and air superiority, that's all featured, which is of course hugely historical flavor. If you don't have air superiority and you try and use airstrikes, your opponent just gets to make free attacks at your aircraft as they come onto the table because they're flying into contested airspace that they don't control, which is awesome. Yeah. It works. It makes sense.
Yeah, all those things are great. And I also want to preface, like, this game isn't meant to be a simulation. No. Like, if you're like a big treadhead, like, there is some things that are going to trigger you about this game. Yeah. And that's fine with us. Like, obviously, like, we like the mechanics of tanks and stuff, but we're willing to let it go for, like, fast play. Yeah. And, like,
balancing fun versus reality. Yeah. And just, I'm always going to lean on fun.
Yeah,
I'm always going to lean towards fun.
And there is, like, people in our group that prefer Fistful of Toes because it does have that granularity with the armor, which is totally fine. But, like, for us, it doesn't really matter that much.
And even this system does represent different kinds of armors.
Right.
Tanks will have special rules for ERA, for Chobham armor, for whatever weird bullshit the British use.
Different ranges, different shot values, Yeah. So it's not, like, totally void of it, but it's also just like pulled back a little bit, be like, okay, that's enough.
That's good enough.
So our camera died, but it's okay. We were done talking about
historical flavor is something that we could talk about for probably 3 hours. It's just like mechanics and playability.
Would you give it a thumbs up?
Thumbs up. Historical flavor, great, awesome. It does a great job. Support really quick. It's from 2006, but it still has an active website. There's dozens of lists that you can download from its website for free. Yep. There are errata, there are FAQs, there are active Facebook groups. There's the Pendraken forum. Pendraken acquired Cold War Commander fairly recently, and that's an active forum where they post there. I would say it is supported. In fact, there's a Cold War Commander 2.
Yeah, so you can't really say it's not when they're coming out.
Yeah, it's not really an abandoned system when it just came out.
But also at the time, like, the errata for this game is 2 pages, and it's not. Yeah, it's great. Like all the added army lists, like there's like 15, maybe 20 army lists online.
Yeah, there's a lot, and they cover a large range of stuff that wasn't covered before, which is great.
Yeah, and the fact like it's still all online for the first edition is like I consider that a win. So I'd give it a thumbs up too.
Yeah, thumbs up for support. So I think that overall, Cold War Commander, first edition. Yes.
First edition. Exactly.
I think that we should give that a overall. It's a definite recommend. If you have an interest in this time period, of an interest in 6mm gaming, I would definitely suggest you look at Cold War Commander.
Or 15.
Or 15 mil. Yeah, good point.
If you have Team Yankee or.
In fact, if you have Team Yankee bases, tip for you: if you have Team Yankee bases but you don't want to play Team Yankee anymore. Everything translates from Cold War Commander using Team Yankee bases very easily.
Yes, absolutely.
It uses infantry stands, it uses heavy machine gun stands, ATGMs, all that stuff's there. So you can do that very easily, just to try that out.
Yeah.
And in fact, I recommend you do. You should try it out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Especially now that you can find the PDF of this game for like $15 or something.
Yeah, I don't remember. We bought a PDF and also a hard copy book, and I don't remember how much they cost, unfortunately, but it did not break the bank.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're going to lower the price now too that the second edition's out. So.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm unanimous. Big thumbs up.
Unanimous.
Yeah,
big thumbs up.
It's dope.
Great
It's one
game.
of our favorite games by far. It's like top 3 favorite games for me.
I'm also very excited to try Blitzkrieg Commander one day and Future War Commander maybe soon.
Incoming transmission.
Hey, so the second part of this video is going to be more of like a podcast style, so don't really expect any sort of editing happening. We're just going to be giving initial impressions of Cold War Commander 2. If that's not really your cup of tea, or if you don't want to hear us rat on it for the next 20 minutes or so, feel free to leave. Yeah. So with that said, let's talk about this guy.
So today we played Cold War Commander version 2, second edition. And our first impressions of it were interesting because, and it's always a bad sign. I apologize. Whenever you start by saying our first impressions were interesting, we had fun, of course. At its core, it is still a game that we enjoy, but they did make some changes. Which maybe we're just being old boomers who are stuck in our way. Yeah. But I think I would prefer Cold War Commander first edition to second edition.
I think I would too. So let me preface here also 2 things. If you guys remember earlier in this review, I said when we were playing Cold War Commander 1, consistently we were like, I don't know what we would add to this game.
Right.
So that's a big thing. So like there was some things in second edition that at face value were like, oh, that could be a pretty cool idea. I guess it's not 2 things. That's the only thing I need to preface. So yeah, there are some major changes. Oh, I guess the other thing would be that if you haven't played Cold War Commander 1, a lot of our gripes about this that we're about to go into, you're probably not going to understand.
Right, that's actually really important. A lot of the things that we are going to complain about in second edition are only because we played first edition and because we hate change.
Yes, so feel free to turn off the video now.
So you can stop.
Yeah.
You can stop. Thanks for watching. You're done.
Yeah, or you can hear us just gripe about some things. And there is some changes at face value that are like kind of interesting, but playing them out, I mean, where do we want to start?
So, I mean, right off the bat, there's a couple things. One thing that really stood out to me is that they've added, they broke anti-personnel and anti-armor or anti-tank in the 2 different stat lines. Before in Cold War,
when you're shooting specifically.
When you're shooting, sorry.
Yeah.
In Cold War Commander First Edition, units have a range and a number of dice that are then modified based on what they're shooting at. And there are examples of things are different, like they have the howitzer special rule, which means that things have shorter ranges against armor, and that was fine enough for our purposes. But they've done in second edition, they've instead broken out that you have an AP as well as an AT value, and these values can be radically different, and you roll these values based off of what you're shooting at. The addition of this has resulted in some things that it's interesting. I said that this felt like a tactical change, because you're really getting into different kind of ammunition types and different kind of velocities versus different kinds of targets. And I never really viewed this as a tactical game.
Right.
I never worried like, oh, well, what's my AP versus my AT range brackets going to be differently. Whenever that came up, it was always a dramatic difference because they had that half range against armor, which is what Cold War Commander First Edition did. Now you get into, you roll 5 dice at 80 centimeters or 4 dice at 60 centimeters versus different kinds of targets. And I don't know if that adds anything particularly interesting to the game gameplay-wise.
Yeah. Idea-wise, it's really... The idea of it is very interesting, because we also play Epic, where it has something very similar.
Yes, I was going to say that.
But in this, the changes between them aren't it's not drastic enough for me to like make it more fun. It's more like just bookkeeping.
Right. It's like it's 80 here, or it's 60 here, or it's 5 dice here, and it's 4 dice here. And I'm like, you can average these together and get a very similar result.
Like for example, like the Chieftains I was using this game, it's like 5 dice at AP at 150 centimeters or 6 dice AT at 125. Right. And you're like, sure, but at the end of the day, like, you're usually not fighting at distances that long anyway.
No.
Especially if you're playing in 15 millimeter. Like, you are definitely not going to be hitting the max of those distances. And, like, we're talking about, like, 1 dice difference for, like, all this bookkeeping.
Mm-hmm.
and it just wasn't worth it in my opinion. Like, you know, going back to what we were talking about in the first edition, it might be a good idea for like those treadheads and people that want to like get into it, but at the same time, some of the stats don't make sense for the tank.
Some of the stats are kind of interesting. There are a couple examples, and I think that the infantry AT weapons were actually the best example.
Yes.
They cut the ranges of a lot of infantry AT weapons, such as the RPG-7, or the Call Gustav, or the Law.
Drastically.
More than in half in some cases.
Yeah.
And that was a very dramatic change. And it had a result, for example, here, it's saying that your Law has a 10 centimeter range versus tanks.
Right, and I don't know what it was. The Law might have actually been pretty low in first edition. Also,
it was in first edition also, but I don't think it was 10. I think it was 20 or 30.
Yeah, but even then, it's still really short. I mean, we're talking like 5 inches.
It's really short.
And there's RPGs in this book that will go like 40 centimeters,
or 60, or 70.
Yeah,
and that's the problem that comes up when you have a really short. And this does apply in some cases to Cold War Commander 2, and this is a valid criticism. When you have really short AT weapons, and you're playing in a game that always has armored vehicles rolling around in it, is that sometimes your infantry just feel like targets.
Yes.
They can't actually affect the battle in any meaningful way. They're slower than a tank. Their range is shorter than a tank. And oftentimes, they have less health than a tank. They don't get a save like a tank, so it just feels like if you're trying to go for that kind of infantry gameplay, it's going to be dissatisfying. And I found that by shortening the ranges in this one in a lot of cases, and then making the different AT stat line, which in some places make it even shorter, just didn't achieve an effect that I enjoyed.
And we can segue even further into infantry AT weapons also can only fire once per turn now. Whereas before, you know, in this game, you're rolling your command to see if guys activate. You can continue trying to activate guys, and like usually in the turn you're activating like a group like 3 or 4 times, so like they're firing RPGs every turn. Now you can't do that. You can literally only shoot them once. And that like.
And I'm gonna stop this video and I'm gonna fact check that when we're done, because if we're wrong, we're gonna cut this section out and no one's gonna see it. I'm saying it out loud so that Tory remembers that we're gonna cut this out if we're wrong. Yeah,
I hope we're wrong, because we have literally read it. Well, I also put it on the Pendraken forum.
Oh, that's right.
And Leon, or one of the guys, wrote me back and he said, well, we figured that like it was making infantry too powerful, which in our experience, they were already on the lower end.
Right.
With like long ranges, and infantry AT weapons are expensive too.
So in some cases, you have a 25-point infantry team who's carrying a 70 or 80-point AT weapon.
Right.
And it feels like it's that, and you buy that value for that team, and it makes them dangerous in all cases, and you're incentivized to do it, and it feels like a worthwhile buy.
Yeah, not one of my favorite changes. It really on the flip side, like infantry can go to ground now, which makes them harder to hit.
It does.
But going back, it just like they can't move if they're gone to ground, and like it just makes them targets. You know, it's just like what's the point? It might work out for some missions where you're playing them super defensively and you need to break through an infantry line, but like other than that, but a lot of the missions aren't like that. And even then, at that point, I'd rather just have a tank. Like, any day of the week. I'd rather just have
any kind of armored vehicle thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so not really one of my great favorite changes.
The recon is really interesting, because in the first edition, recon is like a little block of text.
It's an optional rule.
And it's an optional rule.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's, I think, 3 full pages. 1, 2, 3, I'm sorry, 4, 5. It's 5 full pages for the recon. I don't know if recon's obviously very important. You're talking about historical flavor.
And we love that element of like recon stuff. And
we
like,
do.
To their credit,
and we always take it in first edition.
Yes.
And expanding on it isn't a bad thing, but it feels like such a jump to go from a paragraph to 5 pages.
Paragraphs, yeah.
5 pages.
Oh yeah, 5 pages.
Yeah.
And to their credit, there is some things in there that are kind of cool. Like they can do pathfinding.
Yep.
And like all this stuff, but it is like those things where it's like half a page, and it's like, do you really need half a page to explain pathfinding? It's like the recon unit goes into this place, he makes a roll. Now everyone gets +1 to be able to move into it.
It counts as open terrain to move through it.
Yeah, is that so hard to explain? But it's like literally half. It's like a huge paragraph.
Yeah, it's pretty substantial.
And you know, it might just be me, but like this book also seems a lot more wordy than the first edition. The layout is better, but it is definitely more wordy.
Yeah, the layout, that's really important. The layout in this book's way better.
Yeah.
It definitely feels more wordy. Unfortunately, some things that were worded poorly in the first Cold War Commander, they just barred, copy-pasted the exact same wording into here. So we were hoping that would clarify some things, to be like, oh, have I been playing this wrong for this whole time? No, it's worded the exact same way.
Yeah.
ATGM King is what I'm referencing
ATGM
here.
is a little bit
ATGM
weird.
Evasion.
They did make ATGMs a little bit better in this edition, which
They
I think
did.
is a good change.
They did. Sometimes it felt a little anemic sometimes in Cold War Commander.
Yeah.
But in this one they do feel.
One thing, and one final gripe that I have with it is that there's a lot of mistakes in this book that we just figured out today.
Yeah.
There's basically just like in the unit stat lines, there's a lot of stuff missing. And to be fair, those are updated on the online army lists, but I just wish like they could have gotten it in the book.
Right. This is something that's interesting. You go to, and this happened to me with other games as well, is that you'll get excited for a game, you'll buy it at a con, or you buy it in a store, or you buy a hard copy online, and what you get isn't even correct.
Right.
And I get that there's an appeal to a living rule system, that you can update it and change it as needed. That makes perfect sense. But when you buy the main book and you get home and it's not even playable, what if, like, that is very frustrating. The example here being, of course, that your transports don't have any transport value or any notes listed in there, listed in any of his transports.
Yeah. So I was looking at my basic transport option in this book, and I said, hey, this thing can't transport infantry.
Right. According to how it's currently written, it can't do anything.
But on the online list, that's all been corrected.
And thankfully, to the credit of support, when you reached out, I think a developer got back to you.
Yeah.
And told you where it was and where to find it, and they apologized. Were very nice, which is awesome. Great. I mean, awesome. Nothing against them personally. It's just frustrating when you get a book and then it's already different by the time you get.
Also, like, the only reason we're so salty about this is because we love the first edition so much. So we were really excited for this edition.
We were. Yeah, because we wanted to see. But it's funny because we were excited for it, but we didn't really want too much change from the first one.
Right.
We just wanted a couple things maybe reworded, revamped, maybe new content, but not necessarily any changed old content ones.
Right.
I mean,
take
what you want.
Another final gripe, too, is that a lot of the rules that we liked in this edition, they made optional rules that aren't in that book. They're on the website.
Right. Like,
so
for example,
the whole force modifier thing we were just praising, it's not in that book. It's an optional rule on the website, which, like, I get it. You know,
at least it's available.
At least it's available, and they're probably trying to trim down on cost for the book. But
right, you take something that's literally, I think, like of this big in the book. I think it's like a paragraph size with like a little chart.
Not even. It's like,
and you go, oh no, that should be a secondary role. That shouldn't be mentioned in the book.
Right.
But don't worry, because Recon has 5 pages.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be fair, this book is very pretty. It's full color. That one's not.
Right.
There's more. There's more pictures. There's more graphics in this one.
There are some things that are better explained.
There are things that are better explained. And that's all great. Really, it's one of those things where we've only played this first edition once. This is our first impression of it. Maybe we're just being so salty because it's our first brush.
And I think we'll do a follow-up once we
want to play some
more. But initial impressions, it doesn't feel better than this, in my opinion. Some of the changes I'm just not a huge fan of. Especially the infantry changes, like, they just feel completely useless now.
Yeah, our first, and this could be a scenario thing. Maybe we'll play another game where they feel great. Or we're just
missing something.
Or we could be just missing something huge.
But I don't think we are. I mean, before we made this review, I posted a lot on the Pendraken forums, and like they gave me the feedback. Said, okay, well, that's how it is.
See, overall, Cold War Commander, I'm gonna say actually as a series now.
Yeah.
Is a great game. I would recommend. For no other reason than that there's so much more content for Cold War Commander First Edition now than this one. They're still releasing army lists for this one. That's another actually really interesting point. This book, when it launched, only had army lists for the Soviet Union, the United States, and Britain from post 1946 forwards. That book has, I think,
like 20
in different theaters and different lists. So there is some content missing there. And it was nice.
And again, to be fair, they've posted like 60 or something crazy amount of army lists, but they're all online, and it's just like more work you need to do to get your army list, and Yeah, it's frustrating.
And it's frustrating because like they released 3 in the book. 1 has a huge flaw with the transports.
Right, so it's not usable.
So it's kind of like, okay, like if you wanted to play this out of the book, you couldn't.
Yeah.
Cold War Commander, if you wanted to play that out of the book, you could.
Yes.
You could play anything out of the book with that.
Yeah.
Vietnam is in there, Korean War, Gulf of Aden. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that's Iran, Iraq. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would actually say if you pick up the 2nd edition, get the PDF because I'm sure they're going to update the
Right.
PDF.
The PDF will be updated. I'm sure.
And also, you know, we bought the PDF of this too and got it spiral bound, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
So
like,
you got a couple of those kicking around. We got an official book and a spiral bound from a PDF that we bought. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So in the end, we don't want to knock CWC2 too hard because like we're probably gonna give it a few more
Because it's like the
shots.
brother of the one that we like, so we want to, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But we love this.
Yeah, no,
This is great.
And we will try this more. This deserves a fair shot, and we will try this more and see what our impressions are if they change.
Yeah.
If we're missing something huge, I'm sure that someone who watches this, who loves this game, will yell at us about how we're so wrong.
But if it
and
sucks,
please do, but tell
it's
us.
your fault.
Yeah, but if you're wrong in your correction, then you're double wrong, and
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Just kidding. We love you, Pendraken.
Yeah,
You guys
Pendraken's
make awesome
great.
stuff.
I meant like Facebook commenters.
Oh yeah, they're the worst.
Pendraken's awesome. I love their stuff. I've bought a lot of their miniatures,
Yeah.
so they can't be mean to me.
Yeah,
I'm a
and
customer.
we have a giant Future War Commander 2 wish list coming up, which
Yeah.
we haven't even played, but already just leading the rulebook, we were looking at it and saying, there's so many things like
Yeah.
I want to add to this. So, anyway, we were just rambling about random bullshit for the past 30 minutes, and
Yep.
we just cut all that out so we can end this video in a timely manner. So yeah, end of the day, highly recommend this book. Cold War Commander 2, I think we're definitely be playing more of,
Yes, we intend to play more Cold War Commander 2.
and give it a fair chance.
Yes, because it deserves one. It's the brother of the game that we love. It deserves some attention. We'll see how it does. And
Yeah.
I think we'll probably end up liking it just the same.
Yeah.
We'd have to get used to what's different.
We
about
might
it.
house rule a few things, but
Yeah.
after we get a few more games, maybe we'll do a follow-up video, follow-up review, and maybe they'll change some things in Erwata.
Right,
or
yeah,
something.
exactly. It's still a developing system, so we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, overall,
Big thumbs up to the Commander series.
big thumbs up for the Commander series. You should go play it.
Yes. Especially if you can find this for $8 or $10 on Wargame Vault.
100% worth it. Yeah, so thank you for watching. If we got anything wrong in our review and you don't like it, leave us an angry face emoji and a flaming comment. And
Well, the more hate comments, the better.
yeah, you're no stranger to them. So thanks for watching.
Bye.
Oh, way down south in the land of traders, rattlesnakes and alligators. Right away, come away, right away, come away.